Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The pen rolled off his folder and hit my wrist. I caught it and he kept smiling. Try something progressive, he said, tapping the table twice. I'm Mara, 31, and I watched his hands. He pushed a printed plan toward me, like a contract waiting to bite. The title hit first: Open Marriage, no buffer, no preface. Bullet points marched in clean lines, almost cheerful. He called it fairness and growth, like it helped us breathe. I read the first rule: complete honesty. My chest tightened. His phone vibrated under the table once, then quiet again. Read all of it, he urged, eyes too bright. His knee bounced, steady rhythm, like he trained for this. We scheduled check-ins, no hiding, no overlap. I nodded slowly, testing my voice. It came out thin and still mine. Why now? My thumb pressed the ring once. He leaned back, gaze sliding past my shoulder. We're strong enough to expand, he offered, almost casual. A pause opened between us, sharp, exact. Something already lived inside that pause. I read the clause about disclosure before anything happens. My gut threw up a stop sign. He watched me read, lips parted, breath shallow. Think about the possibilities, he said, softer now. His phone flickered again, one flash, then darkness. I set the papers down, edge aligned with edge. Let's define boundaries, I said, buying air. He nodded quickly, too quickly, like he practiced nodding. Transparency first, health always, no friends or coworkers. His mouth twitched, agreement that looked almost rehearsed. I reached for my water, hand steady by force. I need time before any first step. He pulled his chair closer, wood scraped, and held my eyes. Take a week, he said, almost relieved. Relief where excitement should be raised a flag. My phone blinked with a calendar reminder. He peeked at his watch, just an instinct. Group drinks Friday, he mentioned, casual tone, light hands. Coworkers, he added, prompting no further questions. I swallowed a question anyway. Everything gets shared before it happens, remember that. He nodded again, throat working, eyes bright with plans. We're adults, we can handle discomfort. He reached for my hand, thumb tracing the ring. Heat rose in my face, and not from hope. I lifted the first page again, reading slower. Words like autonomy and exploration stood lined up. They looked clean, yet my skin prickled. I pictured future me explaining feelings to spreadsheets. That picture made something inside recoil. Say yes today, he urged, voice gentle. He tried a grin, friendly, like selling gym memberships. I'll feel safer if we're aligned. My heart tripped on safer. Aligned with what exactly? I set the pen in the center, perfectly straight. Tell me if there's anyone already, I said. A muscle jumped near his jawbone. We're just starting, he answered, eyes sliding again. The tiny slide told a bigger story. I stood and opened the window 2 inches. Not for air, for choice. He rubbed his temple and folded his arms. That's a dramatic move, he muttered, almost playful. The joke landed like a coin in an empty jar. Weekly check-ins, he repeated like a spell. Honesty makes everything simple. Simple hit my ear wrong. Simple is one phone, one promise, one bed. He watched me consider simplicity like it was childish. Fine, I said, slow and deliberate. We test with strict rules and full disclosure. He exhaled hard like a runner at the finish. His relief tasted metallic on my tongue. I recognized preparation hiding under it. I boxed the pages with my palms, then lifted them. I'll keep these, I told him, no smile. He nodded and reached for his phone. Screen face down, casual, too casual by half. The face down screen pressed a new bruise. Tonight stays ours, I said, staking ground. No outside plans until we debrief. Of course, he answered, eyes bright with promises. He slipped his phone into his pocket. The phone buzzed once against fabric, like a tiny alarm. Let's cook something, he offered, voice aiming normal. I reached for the drawer, then stopped short. Normal requires less choreography than this. I glanced at the clock in the door. I felt the shape of a lie forming. Tomorrow we write final rules, I said, pen back up. He put both hands on the table. Tomorrow we're new people, he breathed, almost reverent. I didn't recognize the we he meant. I heard a lock click somewhere inside that word. He cleared his throat and kissed my forehead. I love you, he whispered, careful and neat. I wanted those words to land. They hovered above us, waiting for proof. I left them hanging there, unfinished business. The folder slipped into my bag with a soft scrape. I straightened my spine and forced a smile. Full honesty, I repeated, anchoring the rule. His laugh came too light, like steam off nothing. Steam fades when heat moves elsewhere. Tomorrow, he echoed, offering a toast without glasses. I nodded and reached for the lights. The room dipped, then settled into shadow. He checked his pocket by reflex, just a pat. That small pat told me more than any vow. He stepped closer, arms around my shoulders. I rested my chin against his collarbone. He felt solid and warm and unavailable. I held still and listened for truth. Truth stayed quiet, but the phone did not. His screen flashed under the table and I caught the reflection. I reached across and turned the phone face up. Real-time updates start now. He slid the device back to center with 2 fingers. A notification popped again, unknown name hidden by a preview. We write the rules tonight. I opened a shared calendar and created 3 blocks. Testing, check-in, debrief. He watched my hands and licked his lips. Add Friday, he murmured, eyes not leaving the screen. Friday is us. He nodded like agreement cost nothing. I already promised a round after work. My jaw went tight and then relaxed. Then you notify before arrival, not after. He leaned forward like a pitcher before the throw. I can message you from the ride. I locked the calendar and set alerts. Vibration shook the table again and he froze. Group chat, he offered, shoulders loose and careless. I put the phone beside my water and waited. Another ping broke the quiet, small, precise. The preview showed a heart and a time. He reached for the glass instead of the device. I let the silence press down like a test. Open the message. He tapped and held it there. Dinner next week, hotel mentioned, a winky face. This is before rules, he said quickly. My palm hit the table and both drinks jumped. Then we start with truth. His throat moved and he nodded once. Muted now, I will cancel after this. He deleted the thread and stared at the icon. Deleted is not the same as undone. I created my profile during dishes and breath slow. 2 prompts, 1 clear photo, no slogans. I set filters and paused before swiping. Fear tried to sprint and I kept walking. His footsteps stopped behind me like he hit a wall. You're really doing it. You asked for this. We stood side by side and scrolled. He peeked and laughed too loud. Jealousy arrived like a storm with no rain. First match came fast with a simple wave. I messaged 3 words and closed the app. I told him the exact content and waited. He opened his palm like asking for change. Tell me if you meet him. Only after we write the structure. His smile lifted and then faded. We can handle whatever we build. I checked the door lock twice and listened. Nothing outside, but inside something shifted. Friday arrived with a knot behind my ribs. I texted before he left and requested a location share. He sent a thumbs up and a small map. It blinked to a bar 2 blocks from his office. A new dot appeared later across the street. He stopped responding at 9 and my stomach flipped. 10 minutes passed and then 20 more. I typed a question and left it unsent. The dot moved to an apartment complex and paused. I called once and hung up on the first ring. I grabbed my keys and then set them down. Driving meant showing up without a plan. Instead, I requested a ride-share record from him. He sent a screenshot fast, edges clipped and messy. Drop-off time matched the map, destination cropped tight. Who lives there? No one I know. My chest burned and cooled in one long breath. Send a selfie in the lobby. 3 minutes later, I got a grin and a hallway. Come home by 11. I promised another round. Break the promise. Ticks on the typing bubble came and went. Leaving now, the next message read like a dare. The door opened at 11:20 with a soft scrape. He kicked off his shoes and slumped against the frame. You tracked me like a cub. You asked for supervision when you asked for freedom. His laugh died halfway out of his mouth. I pulled out a notebook and drew 3 lines. Pre-clear, prove location, report feelings. We follow these or the trial stops. He rubbed his eyebrows and nodded without argument. Compliance under pressure reveals intent. Your turn tomorrow, he blurted and raised his chin. Said a coffee or a walk. It sounded like a challenge and a dare. I'll pick a public spot and tell you first. He blinked twice and forced a casual shrug. Morning hit with a headache I refused to name. I texted a match and proposed a noon meet. He read the message over my shoulder and whistled. Fast mover. A vision test. He watched me choose the location and time. Wear something that feels like you. He pretended to tie a knot tighter than needed. Remember the boundary on intimacy. I wrote it, I will honor it. At the cafe line, my hands steadied on the counter. He lingered near the door like a chaperone. Sit opposite the window, he suggested and stepped back. I looked at the table options and chose the middle. Visibility soothes nerves when honesty has holes. Nem. Y match arrived with a direct nod and a quick smile. We greeted with a light touch and short eye contact. I kept the talk on structure and limits. He respected the plan and asked thoughtful questions. I felt my voice grow firm and clear. Halfway through, my phone vibrated with 3 short bursts. I turned it over and saw a new icon. The shared calendar flagged a conflict for evening. His work drinks were moving to Saturday night. He had added a note without telling me first. I excused myself and stepped 2 feet away. Update me before you alter the plan. His reply came with a single word. Moobs. That word rang like a broken alarm. I returned to the table and named the tension. I am here to test trust. My match nodded and lifted his hands. No problem, keep me posted after you talk. I heard how simple it sounded when respect exists. We wrapped with a handshake, not a promise. I walked home without music and counted breaths. The hallway smell hit me, sharp and chemical. I paused because sensory detail can signal danger. Something had been scrubbed fast and recent. He stood in the kitchen with sleeves rolled. How was it? Productive. I watched a bead of water slide off his wrist. He wiped it like he wished he could erase more. Saturday's change needs a reason. We got invited upstairs after the bar. Who invited? A neighbor of a coworker. I waited and felt the truth duck behind the door. Give me the names. He rattled 2 first names and a street. I typed them into our notes and tagged the date. He watched the letters like they might burn. Are we still doing this? We continue only with complete clarity. He nodded and stepped closer like for a hug. I held my ground and lifted a palm. Accountability first, comfort later. His exhale sounded like defeat and relief together. That night I placed the notebook by the entry table. I wrote 3 questions for tomorrow's check-in. What did you want? What did you plan? What did you hide? I capped the pen and felt my heartbeat slow. In the quiet, I noticed his phone light up again. He reached for it and then stopped midair. Our eyes met and neither of us moved. Open it here. He unlocked the screen and held it out. The preview showed a single letter and a meeting time. I tapped the notification and the letter filled the screen. Just one initial with a clock emoji and a street. Who is that? His jaw tightened and then relaxed. Work friend, he breathed, eyes on the floor. Spell the name. He traced the letter on the table like it meant nothing. Not necessary. It is now. He lifted the phone and locked it with a quick flick. I took the notebook and wrote the initial anyway. Below it I added today's date and the hour. We verify before any meetup. He rubbed his temple and stared past me. Silence stretched and thinned like a wire ready to snap. Share your location from 6 until midnight. His nostrils flared like he tasted something bitter. That feels extreme. Then postpone. He weighed both options and exhaled through his teeth. Fine, I'll stream my path. The icon appeared and the map loaded slow. A blue dot pulsed near the office and trembled. I watched it once and placed the phone face down. Trust needs space, not blindness. I booked a quick tea with a match from yesterday. Public, early, short. I texted the plan and waited for his reaction. He typed a thumbs up and nothing else. Approval without curiosity felt like a mask. At the corner cafe, my match waved and took the seat. We kept it light and specific and contained. I drew a small box on a napkin and labeled consent. He nodded and slid the napkin back to me. Call if the framework breaks. My phone buzzed with 3 fast alerts. The dot jumped across town and paused by a hotel. My throat tightened and then cooled on a breath. I excused myself and stepped outside to dial. He declined the call and sent a smiley. Photo at the entrance. He replied with an elevator shot and polished doors. Lobby, not elevator. 30 seconds later, a new image appeared with chairs. No people, no sign, just furniture and shine. Ask staff to hold up a note with today's date. He stalled for a full minute and then complied. A blurry hand lifted a receipt with numbers. Good enough to keep this trial moving. Not good enough to calm my ribs. I returned to the table and finished the tea. My match stayed measured and kind and distant. He offered a handshake and a respectful smile. Ping me after your debrief tonight. I pocketed the napkin and felt steadier than before. At home, I set 2 chairs facing each other. I placed the notebook between us like neutral ground. He came in on the dot with damp hair. He shrugged at the chairs and took the left one. I clicked the pen and waited for the first word. Preview, I prompted, tapping the page. He rolled his shoulders and glanced at the clock. Casual drinks turn comp. Located. I lifted a brow and let the quiet work. He swallowed and started again with shorter lines. She messaged and asked for 15 minutes. Who? The letter. Name. He pinched the bridge of his nose and whispered the full version. I wrote it down letter by letter. How do you know her? He laced his fingers and stared at the rug. Colleagues circle, we crossed paths last spring. Air shifted in the room like a storm edging closer. Spring predates this agreement. He flinched and then pushed his chair back half an inch. Nothing serious. Quantify nothing. His tongue pressed against his cheek and then retreated. Lunch twice, 2 long calls, 1 walk. I noted each item and underlined the walk. He watched my hand like it was a judge's gavel. Any overlap with us? He inhaled through his nose and nodded once. My pulse steadied because clarity beats fantasy. Then tonight proves whether you can stop momentum. He bristled and then smoothed his shirt. I already told her no room for more. Show me the message. He slid the screen over with a thread open. Text bubbles scrolled with quick lines and timestamps. He had typed, we are testing boundaries in real time. She answered, prove it by choosing me or her plan. A final bubble showed maybe tomorrow, then a heart. Delete the heart. He hovered and then removed it with a tap. Now send a clean line. He typed I am not available and hit send. A read receipt appeared and lingered like a dare. I added a 4th rule under the others. No private channels with ongoing history. Archive and disclose before further contact. He rubbed his wrists and stared at the list. His mouth opened, then closed on whatever excuse he almost chose. Your turn, what did you feel at the hotel? He blinked hard like light hurt. Powerful and nauseous. Which one wins tomorrow? He let the question hang between us and refused to pick. I placed the napkin on the notebook like a flag. The small square that said consent looked fragile and strong. I want monogamy if honesty fails even once. He flinched and then nodded slowly like it cost him. Then we will know soon. His phone vibrated on the table with a new alert. Not the letter this time, another contact popped up. I raised a palm and he froze without touching it. Open in view mode only. A group photo appeared with captions and tags and an invite. Respond with not tonight. He typed it and showed me the screen. The reply arrived instantly with a winking face. I watched his shoulders lift toward his ears. The air tightened and waited for one more lie. I stood and moved the notebook to a drawer. We pause until morning and meet again at 9. He looked relieved and disappointed in the same breath. Deal. I clicked off the lamp and left the map running. In bed, I counted to 60 and then checked the feed. The dot stayed home for 10 minutes and then drifted. It paused near the corner store and then a side street. I stared at the path and felt my chest go hollow. At the end of the block, the dot stopped moving. I threw back the covers and grabbed my keys. The tracker pin held at the corner near our building. I slid into sneakers and pulled a hoodie tight. I left the door half-latched for a fast return. Outside, the street hummed with a thin, late buzz. I walked fast until the pin matched my block. The signal hovered near the alley behind the store. I stopped before the turn and typed a single line. Status check, are you home? 3 dots appeared, then vanished like a dare. A car idled halfway down the alley, windows up. He stood beside the passenger door with hunched shoulders. He leaned in and said something quick and careful. A woman's silhouette answered with a tilt and a nod. My chest tightened and my feet stayed planted. Face me now, I texted, short and clean. His head snapped toward the sidewalk where I waited. He lifted a hand once, palm open and weak. Then he angled his body to hide the car. I photographed both profiles before he could react. He walked over with a stiff half smile. Wrong time to be outside. Correct time to confirm integrity. I held up the photo until he flinched. The car door clicked and the silhouette went still. Introduce her. His tongue pressed against his teeth like he was counting. He chose a single letter and tossed it out. Full name. He hesitated and named it like a confession under glass. I typed the name into our notes, date stamped it. Now call from your phone on speaker. He stared at the alley and back to me. Right here, right now. He pulled up the contact and tapped with a shaky thumb. The ring cut through the narrow space and stopped. Her voice slid out casual and quick. Are you good? We need to pause this, he said, eyes on my face. Silence answered, then a small cough, then a final click. Lobby of the hotel was tonight, I pressed. 15 minutes only. Why the elevator picked her? Leave. He rubbed his eyebrow and looked past my shoulder. Proof you demanded, he muttered, failing to hold eye contact. You cropped the destination on the ride log. That was a privacy thing. Whose privacy? He glanced at the car and then down the alley. I recognized the pause people use before a second lie. The passenger door opened a crack and a voice floated. Do you want me to leave? No, I answered, stepping into view before he could speak. Stay and listen. The door opened fully and she stepped out with careful movements. Were you told we are testing honesty? Her gaze flicked between us like checking a scoreboard. He said you are cooling off and heading towards separate lives. My jaw clenched and then unlocked with effort. Not true, I said, letting each word land. She swallowed and pulled a compact bag across her chest. I asked if there was overlap and he said none. Open your messages with him and scroll to last month. She hesitated for 3 seconds and unlocked her screen. Her fingers trembled, but the thread loaded clean. Lines stacked with times and short plans and winks. Hotel lobby, rain checks, late lunches, pet names. My stomach dropped and then steadied like a weight set down. Screen record and send to me, I instructed, voice flat. She captured the scroll and held the phone up as proof. I thought you knew, she whispered, guilt pressing on each syllable. I know now, I answered, eyes still on him. He tugged at his sleeve and cleared his throat. I wanted a structure to make it not wrong. He said it like rules absolve intent on contact. End this tonight, I told both of them. Block each other and send confirmations. She nodded fast and started deleting threads. He tapped with a reluctance that made my skin prickle. 2 block screens flashed and then disappeared from both phones. Now tell me the full reach, I pushed. Any other channels with history? He stared at the pavement and stalled again. A coworker group with private splinters, he admitted, barely audible. Open the splinters, I ordered, palm up for his device. Names appeared with inside jokes and private meetups. I tapped one and scrolled through a party invite chain. A saved contact marked with a star sat near the top. Who gets the star? He looked at the car again like it held an exit door. Old connection, he managed, voice thin and unsteady. Timeline. Months. The word hit me harder than the photo had. My grip tightened on the phone while my breathing stayed slow. The woman shifted from foot to foot and watched me. I am leaving, she said, stepping backward twice. I nodded and she closed the door without drama. The engine started and the car rolled toward the street. I waited until the taillights faded before I spoke. You wanted this open because it already was. He rubbed his face and finally met my eyes. I wanted permission for what I had started. That landed with a dull finality I could not ignore. Permission after the act is not consent, it is cover. Tomorrow we meet at 9 with the notebook. He reached for my shoulder like he could soften time. I sidestepped and pointed toward the sidewalk. We walk home separately and write our statements. He nodded once and stayed rooted like the pavement mattered. At the door I paused and texted 2 contacts. One for a consultation, one for a witness if needed. I placed the phones on the table and waited for breath. His footsteps sounded down the hall 5 minutes later. He stopped short when he saw what lay beside the notebook. A voice memo app stood open with a fresh file. I pressed record and set it between us. Describe tonight from first message to last glance. He closed his eyes and inhaled like a diver before cold water. When he started talking, the timeline cracked open. I held the phone near the memo app and nodded once. Start at the first secret, I said, steady and cold. He gripped his knees and stared at the carpet lines. March, he breathed like the month tasted sour. My thumb pressed record harder, waiting for the next fracture. He walked through messages, meetings, rides, and 3 falsified alibis. He named times and places without looking up. I watched his shoulders rise and drop with each detail. He paused over a purchase that did not match our bills. Which card covered that? I asked, heartbeat throwing sparks. A debit you never used, he admitted, eyes glassy. Where is it? Desk drawer under the invoices. I unlocked the drawer and found the slim rectangle. It slid into my palm like a confession I could swipe. Why ask for an open setup if you already crossed? He rubbed his forehead and looked at the wall. I wanted permissions to reduce the shame. The word permissions scraped against my skin. I let silence widen until he winced. Call the bank and freeze this account now. He dialed and put the speaker close to the recorder. He verified the number and canceled the card. I documented the confirmation code in the margin. Proof turns air into ground underfoot. List every person who knows about this arrangement. He named 2 coworkers, a neighbor, and 1 cousin. I wrote each name, then underlined the cousin twice. Anyone else with screenshots, I pushed. He nodded once and I felt the room tilt. Send a disclosure to those 4 right now. He typed, fingers stiff, tone factual, message brief. We agreed on exact wording while the memo captured clicks. Each delivery checkmark landed like a nail in fresh wood. A reply pinged with a single word, wow. Now pick 1 witness for tomorrow at 9. He looked at the door and back to me. The cousin knows more than the rest. Invite him to our debrief, I said, not blinking. He typed the invite and swallowed hard. My phone lit with a new contact request from a number. The screen showed the letter plus a full surname. I opened it and read a long paragraph. She apologized for the alley scene and added a line. He had told her I moved out last week. I held the phone up until he looked. Explain the move-out lie. I rehearsed exits in case you stalled. There it was, the quiet plan behind the plan. He watched me choose between fury and direction. Dial her now on speaker, I ordered, voice even. The ring trilled once and she picked up fast. He introduced the call and stepped back from the table. I'm listening, I said, leaning into the phone's mouth. Did he promise exclusivity if I agreed to rules? She hesitated, then answered with a soft yes. He said he would shut every door if you said yes. I closed my eyes and kept breathing. Receive this message, I said, words slow and exact. There will be no more contact from either side. I understand, she replied, voice tiny and spent. She asked to send final proof of deletion. 2 clips arrived showing a wiped thread and blocked contact. I saved them to a folder named for the date. Dates keep chaos from rewriting itself. He reached toward me and stopped midair. Therapy can rebuild this, he offered, jaw trembling. Therapy treats remorse, not fraud, I answered, pen steady. You can schedule for yourself by noon tomorrow. My voice surprised me with how calm it felt. I opened the checklist we drafted and added fresh lines. No private chats, no undisclosed payments, no stories that move me out. He read the additions and paled. Consequence for one breach, I asked without blinking. Separation, he whispered, the word landing heavy. Then we act like separation until verification completes. He flinched and glanced toward the bedroom. Guest room for you tonight, I said, spine straight. We divide tasks and sleep apart. He nodded hollow and grabbed a pillow with limp hands. Before he left the kitchen, I set a boundary. No alcohol this week and no late errands. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Confirm by text after each work block, I added. He typed OK and my phone chimed with the receipt. I stepped into the hallway and called one number. Consultation tomorrow at 3, I told the line after it greeted me. I booked the slot and saved the address. It was a crisp move, not a threat. Sometimes clarity needs appointments, not promises. Back in the room, he hovered near the doorway. I want monogamy, he blurted, eyes wet and urgent. Wanting does not erase impact, I answered, voice dry. You asked for buffet rules while eating off my plate. He flinched like the sentence drew blood. Prove reform by handling fallout without supervision. He straightened, then sagged, then squared his shoulders. I'll send notices to the group chats tonight. Include the phrase, we are not separated, I directed. He typed while I watched the letters march. A reply fired from one contact with a laugh emoji. Another came with a photo from a past night out. I recognized his shirt and a timestamp that hurt. That date overlaps our anniversary week, I noted. He closed his eyes and nodded once. Record a message to your own mother about boundaries. His head snapped up like I slapped him. She deserves the actual story, I added. He opened the contacts and pressed the red button. He spoke 3 sentences that did not dodge. I ended the memo and labeled the file with tonight's hour. He stood still, breathing through his teeth like the floor wobbled. We continue the trial only to close it cleanly, I said. He swallowed and held the doorframe with a shaky grip. Tomorrow decides more than therapy ever could. He turned away and padded down the hall without words. I placed the frozen card beside the notebook like evidence. My hands finally trembled and then steadied on the counter. Some grief felt earned, some clarity felt overdue. I set an alarm for 9 and left the recorder on the table. 9 hit and I pressed record before he sat. The journal lay between us like a witness, steady and blank. Timeline from last message to now. He inhaled, then set his palms flat. Fine, I'll go straight. Stop when you reach any gap, I warned. He nodded and glanced toward the door. Knock. The cousin stepped in and hovered near the chair. You asked for a witness, I said, keeping my voice cool. State what you know, I prompted, pointing to the mic. The cousin cleared his throat and stared at the floor. He told me they were already done, he murmured. My jaw tensed, then unlocked on purpose. Date and wording, I pushed, not blinking. Last week, he answered, hands twisting once. He said separation papers were coming today. I turned the device so the red light faced him. Repeat that. Into the recording. He did, each word clipped and unavoidable. You told her we were over, I said, eyes on my husband. He swallowed and rubbed his brow. I was panicking, he offered, shoulders twitching. Panic is not consent. I wrote 3 letters on the page and underlined them twice. Here are the terms now, I continued, measured and firm. You contact no one romantic for 30 days. You share every calendar entry before it exists. You deliver written apologies to those you misled. He opened his mouth and closed it when I raised a hand. Agree or this ends in an hour, I added. His gaze slid toward the cousin and back to me. I want you, he whispered, throat tight. Then pick the consequence for failure. He stared at the carpet and exhaled through his nose. Default to divorce if I break one, he answered finally. On record, I said, tapping the microphone. He repeated it into the air like a pledge. The cousin shifted, uneasy, then stood straighter. I felt something settle in my chest, cold and sure. Start with the apology drafts, I said, handing him a pad. He wrote 3 lines and stopped, stuck and sweating. Specific harm, I guided, voice flat and even. He scratched more words, then pushed the page over. I skimmed and circled missing parts with quick marks. Again, without excuses. He rewrote shorter and cleaner. I nodded once, then passed the pad back. Send those now with copies to me. His thumbs moved, slow at first, then faster. Replies arrived like stones tossed in a pond. A coworker asked if I was reading. Yes, I typed, letting the clarity sting. The cousin watched the exchange and swallowed hard. He knew the gravity had shifted. Next step, I said, pointing to my list. Therapy intake by noon, he recited, voice stiff. Already booked, I answered, opening my calendar to show. He blanched, then nodded like he deserved the wait. I let him feel it and did not soften. I want monogamy now, he blurted, eyes glossy. Wanting is free, I replied, spine straight. Integrity costs action. He reached for my hand and stopped midair. I didn't flinch and the gap stayed wide. The cousin stepped closer to the table. I can drive him to intake, he offered. Do it, I said, still facing my husband. And return the spare key afterward, I added. He blinked, then patted his pocket like the metal burned. Before you go, one last audit, I said. Open the cloud folder labeled receipts. He logged in and winced when the thumbnails popped. I slid the journal near the keyboard and kept count. 3 entries matched known dates, 2 did not. Explain the 2 outliers, I demanded, pen hovering. Lunch near the hotel and a rideshare to the park. Who attended the lunch? He stalled, then whispered the name I already suspected. My grip tightened, then released with deliberate control. Send the full invoices to my email, I ordered. He complied, eyes flicking toward the cousin for cover. You don't need protection here, I said to him. You need accuracy. He lowered his gaze and hit send. Now the final test, I said, leaning forward. Call her in front of us and deliver closure. He trembled, then dialed with his thumb. Speaker on, 1 ring 2. She answered with wary calm. Hi, he began, voice thin and unsteady. My marriage is not open. He looked at me and kept going. I lied to you and to her. I am ending contact permanently and I will not reach out again. Silence. Then her voice colder than last night. He told me you were moving next week. The cousin grimaced and glanced away. It was a lie, I said, stepping near the mic. She exhaled, then spoke evenly and cleanly. I will block you now. Do not try again. The line clicked and the room steadied. I watched my husband lower the device like it weighed pounds. Hand over the passcodes, I said, palm out. He typed them onto the page without argument. I verified each on my screen with quiet clicks. The cousin watched me work and kept silent. Control returned in small, steady increments. Here is what happens next, I told them both. He goes with you to intake. You return here by 2 for the consultation summary. He collects essentials only, supervised by me. Then he leaves for a short-term stay elsewhere. He flinched at elsewhere, then nodded once. I want to fix this from home. Home is earned, I answered without heat. Tonight it belongs to me. His shoulders slumped and he finally stopped reaching. The cousin pocketed the spare and moved to the door. Ready, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. My husband followed, then paused with a shaky breath. I am sorry, he said, voice raw from use. I let the words hang without rescue. The door shut and the quiet hit like clean air. I opened my laptop and emailed the consultation file. Subject line simple. Next steps preliminary. My hand steadied as each line found its place. I gathered toiletries in a single bag. No dramatics, no ceremony. Only what he needed for 2 nights. I set it near the entry and locked the chain. Practical choices: rebuild floors. A text flashed from an unknown number. G here. I braced, then opened it. She asked if I wanted additional proof beyond last night. Yes, I wrote, because clarity survives documentation. Clips arrived in sequence with dates and short captions. I watched them once and saved them to the folder. I thanked her and told her the line was now closed. She responded with a wish for clean exits. I felt a surprising flicker of gratitude for a stranger's boundary. 2 o'clock came and the cousin returned alone. He started intake and signed releases, he reported. He placed the spare on the table without comment. I thanked him and kept my face neutral. He left quickly as if the walls carried heat. Minutes later, my husband texted a photo of the intake form. I saved it to the evidence stack and breathed. He asked if he could pick up the bag at 6. I replied with a window and a condition. No discussion, just pick up and go. Time crawled until the buzzer sounded at 6. I opened the door and blocked the hallway with my shoulder. He took the bag and lingered with damp eyes. Where should I sleep? He asked, voice scraped thin. Not here, I answered, gaze steady and firm. I still want to be your husband, he whispered. I want truth, I said, fingers on the chain. Truth did not want me. He flinched like the line cut deep. Send your schedule nightly at 8, I added, unblinking. He nodded and stepped backward with the bag. Can I hug you? He asked, desperate and small. Not today. The door closed against the plea and latched clean. Space finally existed, and it stayed. At 8 the schedule arrived with addresses and blocks. I acknowledged receipt with a single check mark. No emojis, no warmth. Boundaries breathed easier without decoration. I turned off his location feed and felt lighter. Morning brought the consultation call. The voice asked simple questions and waited for clean replies. I described the agreement, the breaches, the steps. I kept my tone even and my notes crisp. When it ended, I had options. I printed the plan and set it beside the folder. File, then heal. Action, then quiet. No more circular debates with someone playing both sides. The page carried weight I could trust. At noon, his message landed with a request for a meeting. Not until after the 7-day check, I answered. He asked for a chance to speak outside the plan. Structure or nothing, I typed, pulse steady. Dots came and went, then disappeared entirely. I ate, then cleared the table and stared at the wall. Grief moved through like a storm I did not chase. I let it pass without bargaining for a rainbow. There is no prize for pretending. Only rest when the pretending stops. 5 days into the separation, he tried a new angle. A photo of an empty account and a long note. I skimmed the numbers and skipped the nostalgia. Forward proof to the folder, then stop texting until tomorrow, I replied. He obeyed and the thread went quiet. On the 7th day, we met in a neutral room. 2 chairs, 1 recorder. He sat with shoulders drawn and voice steady. I ended every outside line, he began, pushing envelopes forward. I opened each, scanned, and logged their content. I miss you, he added, barely louder than the fan. I miss safety, I answered, unflinching. Safety requires history that holds. He looked away and tried to breathe without shaking. Trying is not trust, trying is training. Here is my decision, I said, lifting the final page. We close the experiment and we separate. His mouth opened and shut, then opened again. Can we date while apart, he asked, voice shredded. No, I said, sharp as a gavel. You wanted cake and a side plate, I continued. You used my consent as camouflage. I am done being your cover story. His eyes filled and he nodded like surrender. He finally understood the cost of appetite without discipline. We stood and gathered our things without theatrics. At the door he reached for my wrist, then stopped. Thank you for the line I did not deserve, he murmured. I pulled back and opened the door. Take care of your character, I said, voice low. He left. Silence returned with a clean edge. I locked the door and leaned against it once. Tears came fast and honest, then slowed. Grief had room and it did not own me. I opened the journal and wrote the last entry. Close file, begin recovery. I wrote one more line under it for myself. Eat well, sleep, call the friend who listens. Then I put down the pen and exhaled like I had lungs again. A week later, paperwork arrived with tabs and signatures. I read every page and signed where the flags told me. Each stroke felt like a brace snapping off a bone. I did not look back at the door for approval. I looked forward. The quiet I chose. He messaged once more that night with a simple plea. Will you ever forgive me? I stared at the screen and waited for honesty. Maybe one day, I typed, slow and sure. But I will not forget what I learned about me. I turned off the device and sat at the table. No music, no chatter. Just my breath and the plan I wrote. I poured myself water and took 3 steady gulps. The glass felt cool and undeservedly perfect in my hand. I slept alone and woke without alarms. Morning light cut across the room like a ruler. I listened for ghosts and heard none worth feeding. I stood, stretched, and made a simple breakfast. I ate every bite without bargaining for crumbs. He wanted a buffet and a clean plate. He wanted permission and applause with every grab. I chose something smaller and harder and real. I chose a table with 1 chair and 1 truth. The only thing on it was me, and I was enough.